So I wanted to continue on a little bit and do an arm rig to go with our leg rig. And again, I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm not going to use the 3 joint chain method of doing IK/FK switching, and we're going to just do it with vanilla nodes and very easy. So first thing I'm going to do is turn on this button up here, which is the snapped projected center. So what that's going to do when I create a joint chain, and it actually seems to work best in perspective view, is just go in here and draw a quick, shoulder, elbow, wrist. And the thing I want you to take a look at is the local rotation axes that get created by that. I'll turn it off. And if we look at them, they're not quite exactly what we'd expect. My rotations in my Y are really kind of weird. When this arm wants to, fold up on itself, it's going to do it at a weird angle. We don't necessarily want that. We'd rather have this thing kind of angled this way to line up a little bit. So what I do is I draw these joints in just as placeholders for a straight arm that we build and then put into that position. So I'll show you how I do that. So what I'm going to do is go to my front view here. Actually, let's take everything in the leg and hide it. All right, I'm going to go back. Oops, front view. I'm going to go back to that joints, and I'm going to hold down V to snap to that exact same position as the previous joint, and holding down Shift, I'm just going to draw out 3 more joints. So this is going to be my left arm joint, my left elbow joint, and I don't know why I spelled it with a W, but we'll fix that. My left wrist joint, and sometimes I call this null, sometimes I call it palm. It doesn't really matter. But I want it to match this other joint chain. And incidentally, the reason I didn't draw this last joint out is because if I had, it wouldn't necessarily be straight. Just as this is kind of has a wonky edge or angle in it, same thing is going to happen with trying to get that last joint perfectly straight. And I do want this last joint perfectly straight because when I add some twist joints in here, I want that rotation to line up perfectly with my elbow. If I'm a little bit crooked, it's not going to do that. All right, so now what I want to do is match the length of both these joints. So what's very cool when you draw a joint is literally just the translate x. So I'm going to grab that value, drop it into my translate x of the new wrist, or the new elbow I brought. I'll grab the wrist here and drop that in like that. And to show you how that works, I'm just going to go ahead and snap them and see how they line up perfectly. And then if I grab this one and snap it, see how they line up perfectly. But the benefit here is that now I have a perfectly straight version of those joint chains, and it's going to rotate in the correct axis back to itself. It's not going to do that weird thing where it's kind of going down like this. So I'll be able to do FK, IK matching, and I'll be able to do an FK rig that doesn't have weird rotations to it. All right, so I'm going to hide my placement joints real quick, and let's focus on creating a very simple rig here. So what I mentioned was twist joints. I'm going to add those. So I'm actually going to select the arm joint and the elbow joint and duplicate them and slide them out. I'm going to arrow down once and delete. Did I screw that up? I think I did. Let's see if I can do that again. Control D, move, arrow down, delete. Nope, it's deleting it on me. Weird. Check that out. There we go. For some reason when I did that duplicate, it didn't get rid of them. In any case, what I have now are these twist joints that I want to use. And actually for the arm, I'm going to duplicate it again and bring it down. And for the forearm, I'm just going to drag it down like that. So in the forearm, I actually have 2 separate joints because I want those joints to drive the twist. So it'd be no twist here, 50% twist here. For the forearm, I'm going to have 50% twist here. And I'll go ahead and reparent those back into our joints like so. And I'm going to rename them. So we'll call this arm twist for 1. And, oh wait, that should have been 2. Left arm wrist 0. Do it that way so I don't have to rename them. And then this one is RL forearm. And just in case we happen to bring another one later, I'll have that in there. Okay, so now let's make the rig. So when you add IK to a joint chain that's perfectly straight, and again, this is how I do it 90% of the time. I build it perfectly straight. You'll see a lot of tutorials that say you have to have a bend put in your joint. It's not true. What the bend is going to do is tell Maya what the preferred angle is. The preferred angle is what tells it which way to bend, whether it's going to be this way, this way, this way, this way, whatever. The thing that is very important is you want to make sure that that preferred angle is only in one axis. So I'm with the attribute editor here. You see I have preferred angle right now at 0, 0, 0 because I haven't put a IK handle on there yet and it hasn't tried to figure that out. In 2024, when I add an IK handle, it's going to try and guess what that should be. I don't want Maya guessing anything. So what I'm going to do is rotate it in, and again, just in one axis. And then if I right click, I say set preferred angle, and I can zero this out. And I go back to that edge editor, you see that it has that value in here. I could have typed that in if I knew what that was, but it's easier just to do it, in the UI. All right, so now when I add an IK handle, and I want to make sure it's a rotate plane solver. Cool. When I go to bend or move that IK, it's going to solve for that angle like that. Okay, so now let's add an IK handle, IK control and a pull vector control. So let's go to, say, the front view here. I'm going to create using the curve tool, set to degree of 1. There we go. Something like that. Okay, so I've made a little, I made a little mistake. Let's try it again. Hit Y, okay, holding down X, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oop, there we go. I forgot to go to that center. So now I have this basic X or locator sort of looking thing, but it's actually a curve. And incidentally, whenever I create curves that I like, I will go in here and I will drag that up to my shelf. So now I have a little button that I can hit that'll just create that curve for me over and over and over again. All right, Control A, there we go. Ooh, that's gonna have to be a lot bigger. All right, so I'm gonna group it to itself, and then I'm gonna snap it to that wrist joint. So modify, match transformations, match all transformations. We'll zoom in close here. All right, let's take a look at that curve. We'll actually make it a lot bigger. And freeze its transformations, delete its history. Didn't have any. And I'm going to go in here and hide the scale and visibility. Lock and hide. Incidentally, it's the same button I have here. Okay, so I'm going to rename this to left arm IK. I'm going to take that IK handle and parent it underneath. Oh, before I did this too, just so you know, once I get my joint chains the way I want them, I'm going to mirror those joint chains using skeleton mirror joints. And I'm going to put it on the YZ plane in behavior and change L to R because I put L's in front of everything. But depending on your naming, it could be different. So, just so. Okay. And then I'll rename the group as well. Cool. That's going to control it. Now I want another control that comes back from my pull vector. Because I built this perfectly straight, I know that the plane it should be on is the perfectly flat plane, right? Because we built it straight. I want to create another one of those little locators, group it to itself. I'm going to call this one L, elbow, PVC, L, elbow, PVC, group. And I'm going to snap that straight to the elbow there itself and move it back in space, make it a little bit bigger, freeze it. Again, get rid of some of the channels we don't want, and I'm going to go ahead and select that pull vector, select the IK handle, and do constrain, pull vector constrain. So now I move this, it's going to move where that elbow is, right? As expected. Cool. So now I need my FK controls. I'll just use simple curves, circles for those. So I'll go create nerd circles, like so. Zoom in on that. Again, delete its history, group it to itself. And this time I'll do the naming after the fact. So I'm going to take that group, select that arm and do modify match transformations. Cool. Duplicate it, elbow, G, we'll move it over there again. Duplicate it, wrist, G, we'll snap it, right? So now I have my 3 controls that I created. I'm actually going to rotate those -90 or 90, doesn't really matter. Make them a little bit bigger so they're visible. Then I'm going to again freeze them and delete their history. I always want to freeze them because if I don't, I'm going to have my access be off. So check this out. Let's go. It's off. Okay, great. So let's look at the elbow because that's the easiest. And if I don't freeze the transformations after rotating this, my axes aren't going to match anymore. Wait. Did I already? Oh. That's super weird. I don't even know what I did there. All right, move it off. Grab the curve. There we go. Sorry, I was showing the group's local rotation axis. All right, so see how I have it 90? But if I go to the group, that's the one that matches. So I want to make sure I go here and freeze transformations on that circle so that it matches up again. All right, now I'm going to make these a little bit bigger. Oh, these two I haven't rotated. There we go, freeze them. And I will show their rotation axes just so we can make sure that they line up, which they do. And then I want to name them. So this is going to name it L wrist. Okay. L elbow. Okay. L arm. Okay. Cool. And I'm going to group them. So the group above the wrist goes under the elbow. The group above the elbow goes under the arm. So I have basic FK arm, and I want those to control my curves. So what I'm going to do is use constraints. So the reason I use constraints is because when using the IK arm, you definitely want to have your joint following no matter what that does. So if you place your hand on a table, it's not going to move around and go all over the place. So I'll select that IK handle, select the joint, and do an orient constraint. Since I've already got them aligned, I'm going to turn off maintain offset so there's no offsets within my constraint. Hit OK. I'm going to hit G, just do it again. I'm just hitting G. Whoops, I hit H by mistake. Good. Let's just double check I did that right. Cool, everything looks good. So right now, if I move my IK handle around, it has full control. You'll notice that the rotations on the wrist aren't quite right. I'm going to fix that in just a second. But I want to show you what happens when I go to this IK blend value channel. I can blend between the two. Right? Okay, put that back to 0. But what I do need to do is add a control here, so, or some channel that can then turn on that IK and FK blend, but then also change the weights of my orient constraint. So let's go down here again, and let's go to our EB curve tools, and I'm just going to create a quick, like, sort of plus sign looking thing. Cool. I'm going to snap it to my arm, and we'll call it left arm CTL. Alright, I can actually get rid of all these channels. For the moment, I'm just going to leave them. But what I do is add an attribute there to make that IK blend. So I'm going to go to modify. Where is it? Add attribute. There we go. I'm going to call it FKIK because if it's 0 on the left side, it's FK, and if it's 1 on the right side, it's IK. I'm going to keep it afloat. I want to have it a minimum of 0, a maximum of 1. Default, I'll make 1. Okay, and then I'm going to drop that into my node editor here. And I'm going to add, first I'm going to do is add the IK handle. And let's make the connection to that. Move this up. So I'm going to go FKIK into that IK blend. So right now I'm on IK. Actually, let's freeze this. Cool. I'm on IK, so if I move that IK handle, it moves my joint chain. If I go to FK, now my FK has control. Except of course that rotation at the end, which I'm about to fix. Cool. So now what I do is grab this wrist joint and get its orient constraint. So if I arrow down 1 and over 1, I'm going to get the orient constraint. I can now plus that into my node editor here. I'm going to show the orient constraint here. And because we named those controls before we made the constraint, we get some nice names in here. So you see left arm IK, left wrist FK. So depending on which one you did first, one would be 1, would be 0. This is just weight 0, weight 1. So what I want to do is when I'm in IK, I want the IK to also be 1. Right? Like that. But when I'm in FK, I want when I'm in IK, I want FK to be 0. When I'm in, when I'm in FK, I want the IK to be 0, right? Which is what I have right now. But I want to just make that connection. So I'm going to hit tab and hit reverse. Create a reverse node, which is a very simple node. Open that up. And all that's going to do is whatever I put in, it's going to negative 1 in. So 0, it's going to reverse it. So 0 become 1, 1 becomes 0. There we go. Cool. So if we look at that constraint, when I'm on IK is 0, FK is 1. And if I swap it, I'm an arm IK is 1, wrist FK is 0. So I can't remember what I was. Oh yeah, I'm in IK. So if I move that IK handle, see how it stays perfectly aligned, like we expected it to. And then, actually I don't even have to move that, I need to keep it over there. And then I can swap over to my FK, and now my FK control my arm. And as you can see, I can just swap between the two. Sometimes what I'll do is change the interpolation type to no flip, because every once in a while you might get like a little funky flip in there or something like that. That'll help that keep that from happening. And I want all these controls to go back to where they're from. What have I got selected? Yes. Yes. What are you keyed? I must have keyed them by mistake. No matter. Delete. I also forgot to freeze the scale on here. There we go. And for our FK, we're actually going here and just hide the translates and scales and visibility. Okay, oh, and you should be 0. There we go. Cool. So let me save that. And incidentally, the IK will always take over, so you don't have to worry about the orientation being off on the lack of control. So you don't have to make a secondary orient constraint on the elbow or on the arm. It'll just happen. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is adding those little twist joints in there. So these guys right now are parented under the main joint, and what I want to have happen, and actually I'm going to put it into FK because it's a little bit easier to see. When I roll this joint, I want these guys to not roll as much. So this one I'm going to have it be at 0 roll, and this one I'm going to have it be at half roll. So the way I'm going to do that is by using some multiply and divide nodes. So what I'm going to do is add the main arm joint in, and then select both these joints and my twist joints and add those in. Cool. Okay, don't worry about that. And basically I'm going to take the rotate and go into the rotate of these joints. So let me make it easier to see. Okay, cool. But I want to use that multivide. It's called a double linear. Open that up, rotate X in, and I could use a plus, or what is it called? Multiply divide node. So I have only one node, it'll do the same thing, but it's kind of nice. I like having singular nodes. I'm going to put that in my rotate X, and then I'm going to duplicate that For the secondary arm twist, same thing. Rotate X into rotate X. But since it's parented under, it's going to follow 100% of the rotations. So if this rotation is set to 1, what do we get is it looks like a double rotation, right? So what I want is the opposite of that. So I can multiply, or I can put in -1, and now when it rotates, it's gonna. Did I not put it in? Yeah, I did. Okay. Let me just double check. 45. 45. Did I not put -1 in? Oh, I didn't go from the output. I want to make sure I go from the output. There we go. So see how now it's going to stay where it was, but it's also going to follow with everything else that I do, which is what I want. So now for this one, I'm going to do the same, but for only half the percentage. So we can do -0.5. So watch what happens when I rotate. So we really just want to look at this joint, and this joint. Doesn't matter what the main joint is doing anymore. Who is okay? Good. Sorry, to turn off the rule of rotation axis. So now you can see that I'm getting what looks like a nice fall-off blend down this arm. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for the lower forearm joint, but we do need to change a couple things. And the main thing is we need to change the rotate order of this joint chain here, because otherwise we're going to get some funkiness, basically. So I'm going to change it from XYZ to YZX. There it is. Cool. And now what I can do is add the wrist in, add the twist joint in, open up those rotates. I'll do the same thing with the reverse node. Oh, sorry, not a reverse, sorry. What I'm going to do is have a multivide, but I want to do a percentage again. So open that up. So rotate X into input X. Make sure you use output into rotate X. But this time I'm going to put in 0.5. So now when I rotate this control, you can see that the other one does a half rotation of the full. I'm also going to change my FK control to YZX and my IK control to YZX. And just for good measure, light orientate constraint to YZX. So they all have the exact same rotate over. So it doesn't have to do a whole lot of offsetting calculations and things like that to get what I want. So now I should be able to rotate this and get a pretty good approximation of what that wrist rotation would be like without it doing too much in the weird twisting values. Cool. Now you could put in series of joints here. So say I had like 1, 2, 3. I could do 0.25, 0.5, and 0.75 or something like that. All right, I'll save that. Okay, so now what I want to do is line it up with my arm here. So I'm going to go back in and show that joint. What? That doesn't look like the right one. Did I zero? Oh. I didn't. Okay, good. So I'm going to go back in so I can look at that placement there. So the easiest thing to do is to actually move the IK group to snap it straight to there, but don't snap the rotations. Well, I guess there were no rotations. But I do want it to be perfectly straight. So what I'm going to do before I snap it is I want to have this axis aligned with the wrist I want the wrist axis to align with the elbow axis. So I'm going to use a quick script called parent-e-oj none. And basically what that's going to do is just align this axis with its parent axis. I believe it's the same thing as if I use orient joints and I put it to none. Or I guess joint to world, that's interesting. Yeah, so now I have the same access point. So again, I'm going to go back to that, whoops, I'm going to go back to that IK group, the one above, snap it to this location so you see it's right in the same place, but I do want to match the elbow placement, and what we can do with that is do that same thing we were doing before with the script to get our pull vector. So that's my pull vector right there. So I should be able to grab the group. Oh, is my pull vector moved? Yes, it is. I should be able to grab the pull vector group, snap it to that locator, and get these guys perfectly aligned. Pretty cool. Don't worry about the elbow rotation, because remember we did do some funkiness when we placed it, and that elbow rotation is not correct, because this is not the correct bend way. When you bend something like your elbow, you always want to bend it in a single axis in the Y or whatever is the upright. So now I can hide that, and what I want to do now is get my FK controls to align with my IK controls, which is a pretty simple thing to do as well. So again, I'm going to go grab the arm FK, go up 1, select my joint. Now this is the joint that's being driven by the IK handle. I'm going to do a modify, match transformations, match rotation. It lines it up, as you can see, pretty perfectly. I'm going to do the same thing with my elbow. And it should line it up almost perfectly. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my wrist. And as you can see, there's no more local rotation axes in the wrong places, but also my controls are now all zeroed out, including my IK control. And when I switch over to FK, moment of truth, there's no movement between them. Cool. I should even be able to take my pull vector here, and since I did put it so it aimed it directly at that elbow, we can try, yeah, it looks like that'll work. Bringing it straight back in its, what was that? Just see what value I used. This is the, well, I don't know. I'm in object mode, so it's this value here, which is its translate X, but in object mode. So now when I go back and forth, I have no weirdness going on. Cool. And now I can go ahead and bind this. Now there's a couple things about binding that are kind of important. I'm going to hide my curves for a second. I'm also going to hide my K handle because I don't need that anymore. If I go through, basically the joints I want to have connected to, I don't necessarily need this joint here, but I'm going to add it in. So let's go in here and add all the joints that I've created. Select the skin, go to skin, bind skin, and this is just a simple skin to get us started. So I'll do selected joints, classic linear, closest distance. I never use maintain max influences. I don't work in games or anything like that, so I don't have to worry about that. Hit apply. All right, we'll turn our curves back on. Select our control here, and let's see what this looks like. Not too bad. Oops, what did I do? There we go. And kind of roll that arm. Now, right now, I haven't weighted my arm correctly, but you do see it's trying a little bit. So let's just put a little more influence on the arm to the twist joint that's in that area. So I'm going to go up here and right click, or I'm going to select the geometry, go to right click and say paint, skin cluster, paint weights. Make sure I can have the option box open. All right. So for this upper area, I'm actually going to do is lock the wrist, the forearm, and the elbow. Grab the main arm, and I'm going to do a scale and bring that value down. And what that's going to do is take weight away from the left arm and give it to the two twist joints. Since they're unlocked, they're going to get the weights. Okay, so let's look at what our twist joints is. And actually, for the second one, let's go a little bit farther down the arm. So again, grabbing that arm, I'm going to go to about here. Okay. And now let's take a look at what happens when I roll that arm. You see that our shoulder doesn't get as much twist. And we get a little more twist in the bicep, probably too abrupt there. So often what I'll do is I'll just select a edge loop and I will run the skin hammer weights tool. And what's kind of nice about that is I'm just arrowing and hitting G. Okay, not bad. So if I move this whole vector, you can see that I get a better rotation there. The shoulder is moving quite a bit, but it's not twisting. If we switch over to FK, and it looks like I need to make these curves just a little bit bigger, which I can do by just selecting all their edge loops or their CVs and scaling them up a little bit. Oops, I don't want to do it that way. I want to make sure that I'm in scale object center. And now I can bring that up. There we go, a little more visible. So now when I rotate, it's much more obvious how this is working. Obviously, you have a clavicle joint on a full character. If I rotate at the elbow, obviously it needs a little bit of weight fixing, but you get the idea. And then if I rotate at the wrist, it's all messed up, but we can fix that. So basically right now, my wrist is looking okay in these directions, but definitely not in the X direction. You can see where that twist is being picked up. We want to have more of that happen down here and less of it happen up here. So what I'm going to do is the same thing, go to paint, skin cluster weights. And I'm going to unlock these joints this time. Actually, I can just lock the upper one so I don't need to colorize it. Make sure I have the, lock the wrist, and I'm going to select the forearm, or sorry, yeah, grab the elbow, and I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to scale the lower part of the arm here. Ooh, looks like my finger needs some work. Smooth a little bit. Cool. So now you see when I rotate on the x-axis here, in fact what I'm going to do is add a little bit back into my elbow by using the add. And we'll steal some back. And don't worry about overspray like that. If I just hit Y and I reload the tool, you'll see what the actual weights are. So I can go up to the arm twist here. Actually, I'll go to the arm itself, unlock that, and let's do a little adding in there real quick, just so it doesn't collapse so much. That's better. Much better. Not great, but better. But you see how that twist works on that forearm. That's the whole point. All right, everybody's back to 0. Cool. So the last thing I want to do is just clean this up a little bit. Oh, actually, wait. I wanted to check the... Yeah, our wrist is not correct. So again, we'll go back to that paint tool. Unlock everything. Go to my wrist joint here. Go to the add. And sometimes that can happen where it just... Whoops. Oh, one of the things you can kind of do, if you like the weighting you have, you can actually do a multiply, a scale, but this is actually a multiply, so I can put like 1.5 and do flooding, and watch what happens. It's going to flood these values. Pretty cool, right? It's kind of hard to see, but you get the idea. Alright, so now when I rotate this, still not quite right. Go back and add everything back in. A little bit of smoothing. And then we can work on that. Now, one of the things I noticed was that I do have twist in my arm that I'm not liking. So the reason for that is because when I had that joint chain in there, I did have some weirdness because of that twist. I should have fixed that before I made the connection. All is not lost. I can just export these weights and bring the weights back in again. So might as well just do that since I'm here. We'll do an export skin weights. There's two ways you can do this. Well, multiple ways you can do this. One is the deform menu has a export weights command. So you can go ahead in here and just, that's fine, arm weights, we'll call it. And since I'm going back to the exact same thing again, it's not a giant deal. The main thing you want to make sure is that when you rebind, that you have the exact same joints in the bind set as you did before. So I'll go in here and say skin, unbind skin, and this seems to be an error that's happening now in 2024 where it doesn't get rid of that input. So I'll just go again in here and say delete history, and I'm going to arrow down once and over just to make sure I don't have an ridge node. All right, now I'm going to fix that wrist so that it actually aligns with my wrist the way it should. Let's go here and go IK. You can see the whole thing moved over, and I'm just going to go ahead and re-snap my wrist joint to match, or sorry, my FK to match my IK. So again, we'll do a quick test. Good, no changes. In fact, what I'll do is using my tool, I'll just make this blue and thicker, and I'll make these guys all blue as well, and use the same blue for my pull vector. Okay, cool. So now what I can do is, let's hide the curves for a second and reselect those same joints that we had before, and then the skin, and do a bind skin, and then I'm going to go and do a deform, import weights, find that weights I did, I called it arm weights, didn't I? I believe I did. And I'm going to go apply, and I tend to hit it a couple times just to make sure I get the exact same thing I had before. I'll bring our curves back, and now when I rotate this, it's rotating from the right direction that we want it to be. And I can go in here and start doing blend shape, or do all my weighting, do blend shapes, do all the fixes I need to do. Okay, cool. So one more thing to clean up. Let's just take all our parts that we have, including the joint itself, group them all up, and in my new group I'm going to call it left arm rig. I'll save this because I haven't saved it, and then what I'm going to do is take all my curves that I created and make a selection group. So I'm going to go sets, create set, whoops, and name this all keyable. So you notice that I didn't name these guys with CTL on the end. What I tend to do is on my IK, I name them IK, on my FK, I name them FK, and on my pull vectors, I name them pull vector PVCs, and then controls that aren't that specific will be CTL at the end. And then I'll put everything to an all keyable set so you can reselect that later on without too much trouble. Okay, well I think that covers everything I was wanting to show. Oh, I do want to go in here and turn off all my local rotation axes because nobody wants to see that. So I'll go to the top here and do that. In fact, I could even go in here and hide all these joints by changing their draw style. So I actually have a control for that. So, oops, that was weird. I threw it away. Okay, so I'm going to select the top here and do a hide. Oh, I don't need that locator I created before. So now I don't even have the joints visible anymore, and I'm ready to publish this and send it to my animator. All right, hope that helps.